You mentioned you're a Bournemouth fan, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
It's got a question from E. Alder on Instagram asking who your favourite player was.
Who my favourite player? I mean, uh,
Should we say of all time? I don't know.
most most dyed in the wool Bournemouth supporters would say Steve Fletcher, who is a club legend. We bought him from Hartlepool, I think, in 1992, probably for like 30,000 quid in a packet of crisps.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
And he was, I think we tried him out as a defender initially, and then stuck him up front, and he proved to be quite good at holding up play and quite often breaking down play as well. But he stuck with the club for a really long time. Went to Chesterfield, came back and saved Bournemouth from relegation out of the league, and what would have almost been an inevitable bankruptcy with I guess almost the final kick of the game against Grimsby at home. And he is a club ambassador now. He was a coach for a while. I think he was assistant manager for a minute, but yeah, he's everybody knows Fletch. Like you used to see him in the clubs after a game, and he was always very friendly. You go up to him and say, "All right, how's it going?" And he was very self-effacing, and just really one of those players who played with his heart on his sleeve, and it kind of I think he'd be the first to admit his skill set was his the technical level was not the greatest, but what he lacked in skill he more than made up for with passion and commitment. And I guess for that he's my favourite player. But
Yeah. Yes. Can I be annoying and get you to put your phone landscape? Is that all right? Just realised that. Brilliant. That's nice. Yes. Yeah, I think I'm a Hull fan and kind of had a similar experience, kind of almost going out of the league and then suddenly you're in the Premier League a few years later. I think you sustained it a bit better than us, obviously.
Hull is. Did you make the playoffs this season? You were there or thereabouts, right?
Yeah, we had a chance of getting in it on the last game, but we missed out. We lost away at Plymouth.
Oh right. Yeah, my brother's from Plymouth, and he was delighted with that. So yeah.
Yeah, then we sacked our manager, ruthless.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
Yeah, fair. What's going on with Bournemouth? Are you quietly confident?
I mean, the plan is, I don't know. We have a very ambitious new owner. His name is Bill Foley, and he's based in Las Vegas, and he owns the hockey franchise there, the Golden Knights, and they're a new team. And I think within 3 seasons, he won the Stanley Cup with them. So I don't think. I think if he's being honest with himself, the Premier League is a bit of a stretch too far. But I mean, he's definitely been making noises about trying to qualify for Europe at some point. So I think I think I would I would hope for at least a top 10 finish this coming season. But we'll have to wait and see. But Iraola, the manager's brilliant. Like he's a lot of fun, and he doesn't. He's like the antithesis of Southgate. He really doesn't know what it is to defend at all. Like even 7 minutes into injury time, he's still trying to get a goal, regardless of what's happening. And I think I've seen a Bournemouth player this past season like maybe walk the ball to a corner flag like twice or something. Like he won't do it. He won't do it. And he seems to be a really nice bloke as well. So I want him to do well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it, for a club with a ground of, is it 12,000?
If that,
What's the deal with that? Are you going to get a new one, or is it just going to stay the same?
he's been making noises about building a new stadium. There were plans for a training ground that were in place before he took over, and they got kind of put on hold when Bournemouth got relegated for a couple of seasons back down to the Championship. And uh, I think planning permission and everything was already in place. And basically as soon as he took over, he was like, yeah, we'll get the training ground finished, and then we'll look at the stadium. But you know, he's up against it because Bournemouth's not really a football town, and there's a lot of like NIMBY-ish kind of like, you know, we don't want like football, you know, football supporters around and all that stuff. But I think he's trying to keep the stadium in Kings Park, which is where we've always played, which is you know, not quite in the centre of town, but it's not far away. And yeah, I'd love that. You know, I'd much prefer that over a, you know, an out of town, you know, stadium in the middle of a car park or something. But again, like there are a lot of hoops for him to jump through. But I think, I don't know. Bournemouth is likely to like go completely Labour for the first time ever in this election. So I think that might actually change things quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And then in terms of you living in New York, how long have you been there now?
I'm in my 15th year.
Okay, yes. And what took you over there?
My ex-wife, I married an American, and we met in Europe, and we lived in London for a bit, and then we moved to Berlin, and then she had actually, prior to us meeting, had started a university degree in New York, and had kind of just, you know, just kind of stopped, and I think she wanted to go back and finish it, and we were in Bloc Party, we were between records, and I was kind of like, well, you know, doesn't really matter where I live at this point. I'm always on tour anyway, and I kind of like the idea of moving to New York, and I certainly wanted to support her and her endeavour. But yeah, we got to New York, and then we separated about 6 months later. So I was kind of like, oh, well, I'm here now. All my stuff's here, so I may as well just stay. And I already had a green card by that point anyway, so that's, you know, remaining was a formality. But yeah. Um, Eventually met someone else and you know, remarried, have a small family now. So yeah, there aren't really, there's no real imperative to leave. Let's just say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it looks pretty leafy behind you. Maybe not what you'd expect from a stereotypical New York. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm in. Well, I live in Queens, and it's a little bit more suburban. Let's just say, though, I can see from like the main street around the corner, you can see the Empire State Building. It's actually 15 minutes to the center of Manhattan from where I live. But it is quite leafy, and it's a lot more familiar to, you know. Let's just say, having grown up in suburban Bournemouth, this is a lot more familiar to me, which I like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I mean, I've always been fascinated by living in America. Um, what is the main, what is the main difference between living there and the UK, do you think?
Uh, Bloody hell! I mean,
Do you prefer it?
you know, it. I sometimes fantasize about coming back, and I would, you know, I would love it if like my son turned, you know, if it turned out he wanted to go to university, for instance, I would love it if I could somehow get him like safely into the UCAS system and save myself a fortune. But he's an American, you know, and you know, he might have his own opinions on that as he gets older. But yeah, New York's amazing, and sometimes even now I kind of I'll be walking around, you know, um, a busy part of Manhattan, and you know, just taking in, you know, the chaos of my surroundings, and you know, I find myself sort of just, you know, I'll pinch myself and think, well, it's kind of crazy I ended up here. You know, I am such a suburban, like small town person, and you know, as a young person, I'd always been very intimidated by the idea of city life. And so yeah, it's very funny. I live here now, but it is an incredible city, and it's everything you could ever want is here in New York for sure. But the same could be said for London as well. But I've lived here longer than anywhere else my entire adult life, so it just feels like home. Really, it just feels like somewhere I live, but it's also a pretty cool place. I think that's really my main experience. But as a country, I feel like um, I don't know, like America. It's funny, like I feel like sometimes your average American is a little bit self-conscious about other people's, outsiders' opinions of your average American, and like, thusly, everyone has an opinion, and everyone feels like their opinion is the right opinion. And I feel like the internet has exacerbated that, and that this access to information, and like I find that like a lot of people here claim to be experts on any given topic, which I find really annoying. And I think that's less so the case in the UK. Like, like if anything, it's the opposite. Like people are kind of a little bit embarrassed to kind of proclaim anything that they might know anything about anything, really, or kind of just advertise that. And I think in many ways there's there's less pressure to kind of perform knowledge or authority on a subject.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, like the sense of humor is different and stuff, in it, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of. I mean, I'm not. I'd be the last person to say I'm particularly funny, but like I feel like a lot of my jokes kind of fly over the heads of most people I encounter here.
Yeah, fair play, mate. Well, yeah, let's take it back then to life in Bournemouth. Um, were you always playing drums from an early age? Like, how did you get into it?
Uh, I was always very interested in music, and this goes back to early childhood, and there were numerous photos of me as a toddler wearing headphones, standing next to the record player, and just being very captivated. And I figured I always wanted to play something, and I was just very drawn to the piano. I really wanted to play piano, and that was the first instrument I began to learn from the age of 6, I think. And um, at a certain point, I think I realized that piano wasn't that rock and roll. So I was like, oh, maybe I should try guitar instead. And uh, I started guitar. Well, I played cello as well for a bit as well, but I started guitar, and I just have very weak wrists and fingers, and I just found it very hard to actually like manipulate the fretboard. And so I mean, I still play guitar a bit, and I do enjoy playing, but I realized I was only going to get so far as a guitarist, and around the age of 11, I just found myself like naturally drawn to the rhythmic aspect of most music I listen to, and I really got into listening to hip hop as well around that time, and it was kind of midway through the era of golden age of hip hop, and there were so many like cool funk samples and stuff, and I just always wanted to break down how those rhythmic elements came together to form a song. And yeah, I would find myself just tapping out beats on my lap, inadvertently manifesting the same logic that you actually need as a drum player. I was kind of doing everything with the correct hand, and I don't know. I started a new school, and they offered drum lessons, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So that's really how I got started. But I was rather restricted in my ability to play because I couldn't afford a drum kit, and I don't think my parents particularly, having already gotten me a piano and X number of other musical instruments, I think they weren't necessarily like looking to like bring in this extremely loud Celtic thing into the house. So yeah, I got a 20-minute lesson every week that was shared with another student, and that was it. That's all I got. And I ended up I'm left-handed, and I ended up learning right-handed because there actually wasn't enough time in the lesson to switch the drum kit around. So that's really how that's how I learned the instrument.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting though. So you're only having lessons once a week. Were you able to like build momentum that way, even though it was the wrong way around as well?
Not not really, but then I kind of uh, as an 11-year-old, I didn't really. Um, let's just say there weren't opportunities for playing with other musicians, and it wasn't really until I got to about 13 or 14 that I noticed that some of my peers were also becoming interested in playing music as well, and started noticing kids showing up to school with guitars and stuff, and maybe trying to jam and form bands and so forth. But yeah, there just wasn't that imperative to try and like access. For me, access drumming like as an extracurricular activity. It was always like within the school system and the way that music was taught in my particular school. But yeah, I think around 14 or 15, I think I borrowed the drums for an Easter holiday, and that's really when I began to make some improvements. And then there was one summer where I had the school drum kit for the entire summer, and I was playing with some guys from my school, and we were trying to do a band, but didn't really, the singer never showed up, so it didn't really work out.
Yeah, fair play. Did it feel like? Could you tell it was your thing though? Do you think I've got like a natural feel for this type thing?
No, I think I was all right. I would say I was maybe an average player, and I already had a pretty good sense that I wasn't going to get that much better with practice, and that my body wasn't going to let me do the kinds of things that I wanted to do or hoped to do on the drums. And that's been the story throughout my whole career as a musician, is kind of playing against those limitations. But I did like the attention, and you didn't really meet many other drummers at school. There definitely weren't many drummers like taking up the instrument in the early to mid 90s. So everyone wanted you to play with their band or jam with them, regardless of your skill level or what genre you specialised in. And yeah, I mean, you remember what I looked like in Bloc Party. I mean, I was an even nerdier version of that at school. So I really, but I was mostly overlooked for cool and interesting things, really, even if I didn't necessarily feel as I looked as a human being. But yeah, it was kind of like I don't know. I think I began thinking to myself, there's a certain amount of power in actually being able to play this instrument that not many other people pick up or try and learn. And I did like that, but I also ended up feeling a little bit disposable as well, because I was just passed around from one group to another, and like I felt like I had very little say in the matter or any real agency in my own musical destiny. And it wasn't until I started doing A levels and some new kids joined my school, and this one kid who I viewed with some suspicion because I thought he was copying my haircut. Was in my English class, and I didn't talk to him for a year. And he's my best friend now, and his name is Babak. He's actually an artist of some repute, based in London. But he was a guitarist, and we meet when I finally got round to when I finally got over my attitude towards him and spoke to him a bit. I found that we had some overlapping musical interests, and because his parents are Iranian, I think we also bonded somewhat, maybe unconsciously, over the fact that we were we were two of like a handful of like non-white kids in our school as well. So I think there's this kind of outsider thing that brought us together. And that's really, we started doing bands together, and ultimately I moved to London so I could try and do a band with him. Which didn't work out, but that's through Babak I ended up meeting Kelly and then the rest of Bloc Party.
Yeah, yes. How did you meet them then? Was that quite organic?
I moved to I did a philosophy degree at the University of East Anglia, and when I graduated, I realised actually I had very I realised that what the future held for me was a career in pizza delivery. So I moved back home and had a very depressing year living with my mum and my brother, delivering pizzas. And my mum one day out of the blue just said, "Look, you seem depressed. The only thing you ever seem to care about is music. I think you should just like forget everything else. Just do that. Like just do music." And and yeah, it was just this. It was this life-changing moment. Just my mum kind of giving me permission. Not that I needed permission from my parents particularly, and not that they were strict or had like very specific ideas of what I should be doing, but just that this kind of quiet validation from my mum really gave me like this impulse to pursue music. And I was like, well, there's fun going on in Bournemouth, so I better go somewhere else. And I was like, okay, London. I'm gonna move to London. I'm gonna get myself on a music technology course, and I'm going to try and do a band with Babak. And so yeah, I spent a year living pizza, saving up, applying to universities, and yeah, I got into a music technology program at Thames Valley University, which is now the University of West London, or like it got incorporated into the University of West London. And yeah, so yeah, that was my that was my reason for moving there. But really, I wanted to do bands. But really, what happened was I would just go drinking with Babak, and we'd write down a long list of band names and like album titles and song titles, and we thought that was like a lot more fun than actually trying to write music. Just having all these like stupid band concepts. And he worked at a cinema he worked at the Curzon in Soho, which is an art house cinema on Shaftesbury Avenue, I think. And he one day this Babak was like, oh, there's this new guy at work. He's a bit weird. He's like very serious. He's very serious about his band. He's always playing gigs and like I don't know, like, and I think that was quite impressive to Babak as well, even though he'd been living in London for so long, because we didn't actually know someone who had like access to a network of gig promoters and various toilet clubs and whatever else, the things that you needed to do to try and like get a career started. And Kelly already had all of that, but like I was always like, yeah, fucking hell, that's all he talks about is his band, and he's like very serious. It's a bit weird. I'm not used to this. And he was always looking for a drummer. Like they went through so many drummers, and he'd never heard me play, and I think maybe he felt like I was somewhat relatable or something, and he from more or less from the moment we met, he was haranguing me to play in his band, and I was just very resistant, and it took about a year before I actually finally agreed to do. I was like, all right, you've worn me down, and maybe maybe I should just try it out and see if I can actually even play in front of people. Like I have no idea. I'd never really done it properly before. And that's really how that whole thing began for me.
But why were you so resistant then, out of interest?
Because I don't think I quite knew what I wanted from music. So I was on a music technology course. So like part of me really wanted to just work in a studio and not be involved at all really in playing music. I was more interested in producing or engineering or whatever, or actually making the sounds come together by that point. But I was slowly starting to realise that actually it's quite a thankless task, and studio work is really hard, and you have to be very focused, very committed, and very disciplined to do that, and to work with musicians who are actually just awful people for the most part. So it's like all those, like managing all those egos and petty rivalries and insecurities. I mean, it's you need to be a therapist first and foremost, and then a producer or an engineer or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I think there was maybe a part of me that thought that perhaps, I even then, like when I met Kelly and like eventually went to see the band that went on to become Bloc Party perform. I was watching, and the previous drummer was a much better player than me, and I was like, well, I'm not as technically as accomplished as this guy, but I think because of that, there isn't a huge amount holding me back in terms of the energy and the enthusiasm and maybe the excitement I could inject into this. And I just began thinking to myself, well, yeah, let's see if that's enough. Let's see if that's enough to carry me through a period in playing in a band as a drummer, and that's really what happened.
Yeah, I mean, someone did ask that question. Just try and find it on Twitter, just regards to you being the ninth drummer. Was that something? Did you feel pressure because of that, or obviously you had a personal relationship with Kelly, so maybe you didn't?
I didn't have any pressure because I wasn't approaching it in the same way as Kelly and Russell and Gordon were. Like I didn't see it necessarily as a career. I didn't think that's just the stuff of dreams, isn't it? Like how many people actually get to do that for a living? And yeah, I think I still had this very small town mentality in terms of like how I approached most things, and I was very much like, no, I'm just happy to be here, man. And I think it's such. I mean, yeah, the only pressure I felt at the time was to, it was very much on myself, and it was to knock things up basically, and actually, not embarrass myself, and at least seem competent, or that I vaguely knew what I was doing. But I feel, and maybe it's something that's probably always held me back, but I've always been like very self-aware about the limits of my ability, and like I knew I wasn't as good as some of the other people I'd seen or heard the band play with. Uh, so I didn't really approach it thinking, well, I have to be the best drummer ever. I just have to be competent, and I have to be interesting enough as a musician to justify my position here, and that's really all it was.
Yeah, I mean, like when you say you felt you were limited in some aspects, do you think that made you into a bit of a unique drummer in some respects?
Yeah, I mean, insofar as as I think as I already touched upon, like I
Like the way you adapted type thing.
well, yeah, I mean, I was playing against I was playing in opposition to my lack of technical ability, and so yeah, one would often have to try and find shortcuts to achieve a goal, or try and do something to mask something else, and I think yeah, to an extent that informed my playing, and I've said in the past that. Also, my lack of athleticism and coordination was also an issue, and I'm drumming is like a sport, and like particularly in Bloc Party, where the average BPM when I was in the band was about 170, like extremely fast. Um, that 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 was really hard, and the first few practices, I was just lying in the corner basically between songs because I couldn't even breathe, and
Yeah, yeah.
I used to smoke a pack a day back then as well, and yeah, I wasn't. Let's just say I wasn't in great shape, and I didn't do any other exercise other than play the drums. So I was always trying to find ways through the song where I could maybe get a break or a brief respite from the intensity. So that also informed a lot the way some of my drum parts came out, because I'd try and do something to like buy myself a bit of time and like just kind of switch something around so I wasn't playing quite as intensely, and that's why a lot of Silent Alarm has this kind of start stop aspect to this start stop. Yeah, there are a lot of pauses and little gaps there where I'm just trying to like not die.
That's really interesting. Um, and then from the point you joined, was it a fairly like kind of rapid, steady rise, quite a linear path from there, or were you playing quite a lot of gigs early on without any kind of sign of getting signed?
um, yeah, it happened pretty quickly. I was actually shocked by how quickly it happened, but bear in mind the band had already been gigging on and off for like the previous 2 years, so there was already a pretty solid platform for me to kind of build on, I suppose, when I joined. And um, Kelly was hyper focused, extremely driven, and like really committed to making this work. For himself and I guess for the rest of the band, and yeah, he was already pretty connected and um, quite bold, really, in the way in which he pursued opportunities. And he said to me at the start of 2003, when I'd been playing with the band for about a month at that point, he did say, I've got a funny feeling this is going to be a good year. I was like, all right, sure, okay. But we played we gigged maybe once a month, a couple of times a month for the first 6 months, and there were, peaks and troughs, and once every while we do a gig, and someone, handful of people would come up afterwards and be like, "Whoa, this is great! Like, I haven't seen anything like this since I saw, Wire play in 1979 or whatever." We're like, right, okay, and then we do a gig and it would just be the worst. Like something, the strings would break on the guitar. Someone would do a fart, or like I'd fall over, and it was just like the worst gig ever. And you'd be like, oh, back to square one again. But we kept plugging away at it really, and I think we were lucky as well because the time was right for a bunch of British-based guitar bands to start breaking through, and we worked hard at it. I mean, Kelly definitely worked extremely hard during that year to make it work. But there was also an element of being in the right place at the right time as well. Like we were fortunate that a few things began to happen that worked very strongly in our favour. And one of those was meeting Steve Lamacq at a Franz Ferdinand gig, which we were only at because Kelly had reached out to Franz Ferdinand and asked, sent them a demo and asked if like maybe we could play a couple of gigs with them or something. And they were like, yeah, sure, come and we're playing at the ICA, come and meet us, and we've got this thing at the Electroworks. It'd be cool if you played with us. We liked your demo and everything. And Steve Lamacq was at this ICA gig, and we were a bit too nervous to approach him, but Kelly passed on a demo CD to a friend who gave it to Steve Lamacq, and like 2 weeks later, his producer emailed Kelly and was like, "I want to play what was the earliest recorded version of She's Hearing Voices. I want to play it on my show." And we were like, "All right."
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned like it was a good time for British bands. Like, were you into that personally? Were you into some of the bands that were around at that time?
Yeah, no. I mean, it was a funny one because that was only beginning to kick off, and I was more into like the American stuff. Yeahs I thought were cool, for instance, and like early, like me and Gordon mainly bonded over our shared love of post-hardcore and like kind of early mid '90s American alternate acts, I suppose. And like the British stuff. That one thing I'd always and still struggle with, particularly in places like the United Kingdom, is how insular everything is and how compact it is as well. So if one thing takes off, suddenly it's proliferated to the point where it doesn't feel like there is anything else. There's any other alternative, and you just go out and you'd hear the same Gang of Four song playing every night, and you'd be like, fucking, like, no one knew who this band was 6 months ago, like nobody, and now everyone's like, yeah, Gang of Four, they're great. And of course everyone thought that we were trying to be Gang of Four, which Gordon was into Gang of Four, but Kelly and Russell certainly weren't at all, and like I don't think they ever listened to Gang of Four. So it was, I guess, this kind of unconscious osmosis, like stuff sort of starts to sink in, but we weren't consciously trying to sound like that band, for instance, even though they were cool. And so I think for me, I was always like very conscious of like how quickly like the UK guitar scene began to chase whatever was popular, and I'd seen, I'd been around enough to have seen that happen over several successive like British guitar generations, I suppose. And it was kind of weird. Everyone sort of very quickly started sounding like everybody else, and I was kind of like, I don't know. It all sounds like the same to me. I'm not that bothered. I thought Franz Ferdinand were cool though. Initially, I was kind of like, I don't know. It sounds got that slightly like honking, like very mid, like slightly distorted vocal. Sounds a bit like Julian Casablancas. Whatever. But actually, I got more into it, and I thought they were a cool band. Was really into the Cribs, who were our future, label mates on Wichita, and I'm still friends with those guys, and coincidentally, Ryan lives in the like next neighbourhood over from mine, so I see him once in a blue moon. We go to the pub and complain.
um, yeah, and then in terms of Silent Alarm, was the bulk of that album already kind of written when you joined the band, or how was that?
There were a couple of songs that there were a couple of song fragments from existing songs when I joined that ended up becoming Silent Alarm songs, but most of it was written after I joined. Um, so one of the first songs I learned with Kelly, Russell, and Gordon was a song called Rivulet, and the main riff from that ended up becoming the Pioneers. But that it was just a riff. The Pioneers was a completely different song from Rivulet. So that was one song, and then The Answer, which was like a B side, which was actually just a demo recording we ended up making. That was a song that carried through to Bloc Party as well.
Okay, because I think Russell said it was quite democratic, like you'd all get in a room with an idea and see what happened. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, we'd meet every Sunday at this rehearsal space in West Acton, and rehearse for 3 hours. And again, Kelly was like quite meticulous and quite organized in how we used that time. And what really helped us during that first year or two was the fact that Kelly and Russell would meet midweek and play with each other, so that their guitar interplay was already kind of figured out, and then it was just a case of me and Gordon trying to like play on top of that or play around it and work out a suitable rhythm section part for those songs. And uh, yeah, Kelly definitely had a pretty clear idea of what he wanted to achieve every Sunday, and we would sit down with ideas, or we would listen to what he and Russell were presenting, and try and jam around that. And he had this like huge portable tape recorder, and he'd record the whole rehearsal, and then he'd just take it home and like make notes or whatever, just try and pick out the bits that really appealed to him, and then gradually things, ideas, riffs, a bit of jamming, they would start to become songs.
Yeah, yes. And like, how would you? I don't know. Was it quite natural for you to just like figure out? It's obviously like, some quite complex drumming with Block Party. Were you just quite natural with it in terms of how you came up with things?
I got some pretty good direction, and like particularly as well, like Gordon. Um, Gordon is an excellent bass player, and I think he's reminding people of how good he is now in his new band, The Nun, who I fortunately got to see play in when I was back in February, and just reminded me of how fucking good he is, and like uh, how on top of his sound and his like note placement he is. And I think actually being able to play with him made my life a lot easier. And I think between the two of us, we were able to kind of come up with a musical conversation, so to speak, that worked. And yeah, playing with him made my life easier. But I got some pretty good direction from Russell and Kelly as well, for sure. And um, Kelly at that time was like very into drum and bass, so that's why a lot of my beats kind of have that feel as well. And that was I didn't listen to drum and bass; I wasn't particularly a fan. And so it would be me partly fighting against that, but also trying to incorporate his ideas and try and do my best approximation.
Yeah, yes. And then just to feed in one of the questions from Connor Rivaldo on Instagram, he says, "How did the drum parts for Like Eating Glass come about? Got to be some of the most insane drumming I've ever heard. It changed music for me."
Oh wow! Thanks, Connor. Again, I think that's at the start there. That's kind of it's definitely drum and bass BPM, and it's a drum and bass feel. And I think that was one of the times where Kelly actually came in and like he knew exactly what the beat was supposed to be at the start there, and I just did that, and then the rest of it was I don't know. I mean, the other you've got that intro, and yeah, it's almost like a motif or like kind of a drum. It's like a riff, but on the drums at the start there. But yeah, I had that to work with, and then I kind of wanted it to, for the chorus, I wanted it to kind of go. If I recall, I wanted it to straighten out a bit and be a lot more kind of motoric and kind of, uh, a lot more kind of. I'm gonna have to use it angular, I suppose. That was the last word I wanted to use to describe our music, but there you go. I wanted it to be a lot more solid sounding and less kind of swinging for the choruses. I think I wanted them to pop a bit more. And then the other, I think for me the other key bit was the breakdown, which is another verse, I suppose, after the second chorus, where there was a lot of start-stop, bass and drum syncopation. I think Kelly was like, "Yeah, I want this to happen as part of the song," and I think me and Gordon basically figured that out ourselves. I think Gordon came up with that bass line, and then I was just trying to do something interesting that switched around a bit on top of that. And I think in the back of my mind, I was sort of thinking about like some of the stuff that DJ Shadow was doing and introducing, where it's quite minimal in parts, and some of the drum loops start to, he starts to kind of cut them up a bit and like syncopate them with the other samples, and that's really where that came from.
Yes, and then he sent in another question. So what's that? Was the tendency for the band to get out of time sometimes, even a whole beat off, but then always end up back together again, inspired by anything? Was it ever discussed if anyone else were to do that live other than the Libertines, people would have done them? But with Bloc Party, it was part of the appeal and translated the energy and emotion even better than if you guys would just stand up, play there, straight face, and in time as possible. Think about all that.
I guess that's a backhanded compliment, I guess. No, it was completely unintentional. I mean, like, as is well documented, the tempos, at least when I was in the band, like went all over the place. But that was mainly me, and I think I was less interested. Like, at least when we performed live, I was a lot less interested in trying to do things perfectly than I was like in trying to capture a feel for whatever was going on in the moment. And it wasn't really, I probably approach things a little bit differently now, but like at the time I was kind of like, yeah, I don't care. Like, there are a million other people out there who play exactly on the grid and like can do it perfectly every time, and I'm not one of those people. It doesn't come naturally to me. I probably could do that, but like it would be a lot of work, and it wouldn't really feel like me anymore. And you can either take it or leave it, and I don't think I ever would have, I don't think I ever would have turned out to be the kind of drummer who could like, play in a stadium rock band and do that, in a very accomplished way. But it was clear Bloc Party were never going to be that kind of band anyway, so it didn't seem to matter. Like, we came up through playing pubs and then kind of very small, sweaty indie venues, and it felt to me that the natural thing to do was just to like really follow instinct and not really overthink things too much. When I did begin to think or overthink things, that's really when I felt like my playing began to suffer, and that came a little bit later on. But but at the time, there's there have definitely a few times where, like in the past, where like Russell just like teased me after the games, been like, that bar wasn't in like 7/12, Matt. What were you doing? Like, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm sorry.
I suppose that answers another question from Jimmy Curtis, who says, were you aware at the time how unique your drumming was for a band of that scene and how integral it was to Bloc Party's overall sound?
I was aware insofar as like I was consciously not trying to do whatever else, what anyone else in that scene was trying to do. But in terms of what, I don't know. I try not to think about it too much because I could, as I said earlier, like I was really aware of my limitations and like I knew the minute I started believing the hype or whatever, like there'd be someone waiting to sort of totally take me down a bunch of pegs, and like remind me of who I was and where I came from. And so yeah, I mean, like there was a moment I think when we were driving up to Middlesbrough, and Simon White, who was one of our managers at the time, jumped in the van with a compilation of all the demos that we'd recorded up to that point, and we were in the planning stage then for recording Sign on the Line. We were trying to figure out what would make the final cut, and we listened to all of those songs in a row on the way up to the gig, and I was kind of squirming in the back of the van because all I could hear was drums, and I was thinking to myself, "What I've done? Like I've just turned this whole record into a drum solo. Like everyone else is going to hate me so much." And part of me was like, "Wow, that's cool. That's cool." I did all of that stuff, but then I was also like, "Yeah, I hope people realize there are still songs in here." And I'm sure at some point someone's going to tell me to actually just play everything like in a much more much more constrained manner, but that didn't happen. But yeah, I guess I had this maximalist approach that was actually kind of helpful when we were recording Silent Alarm, because Paul Epworth like really helped preen it away and like really turn it into something a lot more compact and like something that made sense to the listener. Even like I'm sure there's some people listen to that now and think the drums are really annoying, but through like the 4 very intense days of arguing and going back and forth with Paul and like just like pushing and pulling the parts all over the place and breaking them down and putting them back together again, we had something that made sense. And I was so grateful for having gone through that process and actually having this mirror to what I was personally doing that wasn't the band. And I think Paul was so integral not only to how the drums came out but how the rest of that record turned out. We couldn't have made that record without him, but I was more aware of the drumming insofar as like a lot, there was a lot of pushback, let's just say, and a lot of people were like, yeah, that's too much, like too much, you can't do it like that. But I guess sometimes it's just good to throw it at the wall and see what sticks, and if you've got more to work with, then you at least have like a lot of material, right?
No, it's brilliant from my point of view, and I think a lot of people. Yeah. So recording the first album, was that something? It sounds quite intense, but did you enjoy it?
It was intense. There were definitely moments where we didn't know where it was heading, and like obviously, you're doing your first record. You don't know if you're going to get to a second one. Like, we were all very aware of the machinations of the music industry by that point, and we just didn't know. Like, we didn't know what was going to happen after we made Silent Alarm. We didn't know if like something catastrophic would happen internally, or if the whole thing just didn't take off at all, or if it just would meet with complete indifference. So you kind of just, you're trying to get everything down. You're trying to service everything as best as you can, because you don't know if you're going to have another chance to make any kind of creative statement whatsoever. And that was something that definitely informed my experience of making the record. And I just wanted it to, I wanted to personally state my case, and I wanted everyone else to as well on that record, and for us to do the best job. So that kind of pressure like made it a little bit difficult at times, but I still think about the month we spent in Copenhagen doing most of the tracking for the record, and it was one of the best months of my life. It really was. I'm very fond of that time, and I'm so deeply grateful to have had that experience. It was so cool. Like, first off, we're living away from home for the first time in our lives, which was really cool, in a really wonderful city, with really cool people. And we're also making a record with Paul, who's this, crackpot genius, like a complete fountain of ideas. And being, within that process, but then also being like kind of having a window to it as well was just so cool. And that's something that will always live with me. And I, amidst all the uncertainty and like how difficult making some parts of that record was, like was a thoroughly enriching experience, and overall I enjoyed it immensely. It was so much fun. I mean, it didn't hurt that I was done after 4 days as well, so I was in the club for the rest of it.
Excellent. And then obviously when it starts getting the reviews and ends up being like NME's best album of 2005, is that quite a satisfying feeling, or at that time you kind of like in the whirlwind of it all?
Um, it was a bit unnerving, and I think there was also some controversy because I think I bel it's my understanding actually that Arcade Fire was going to be awarded Album of the Year, and at the last minute that decision was pulled. I think someone on editorial like changed it, and I think maybe wanted a British band to be Album of the Year or something. But we don't know what. I actually don't know what happened, but like I understand that was how that was meant to play out. So, like, and there were just definitely some rumblings of discontent around the band. I think a few people were annoyed that had actually happened. And yeah, that kind of soured the whatever idea of achievement that could have possibly have been for me. And yeah, it was nice to have the plaudits and to have the attention and to be somewhat acclaimed at the time. But I was kind of like, yeah, we're just the band at the end of the day. We've got to go back and do this again now. So who cares if like we're Album of the Year or whatever? We already did everything we set out to do this year.
Yeah, fair. I mean, he had, like Russell was saying, he had a bit of a mixed relationship with NME anyway, type thing.
I think we did before we were in the band. I think we all we'd all grown up reading, and we also knew how weirdly catty that magazine was, and like how quickly they would turn against people. And we knew that you could have your moment in Sun one day, and the next day you'd just be completely ridiculed and kicked to the curb. So yeah, I think that informed most of our dealings with the magazine. I mean, it was great. I mean, we were on I think that first that Silent Alarm cycle. I think we made the front page about 3 or 4 times. We were on the front cover 3 or 4 times that year, which was really cool. And obviously, I'll grudgingly admit that really helped our career. But I mean, I never had that much respect for the enemy, really. So
Yeah, fair enough. And then, yeah, when it came to like TV performances, looking back on some of them now, they're just outstanding, really. Like Jules Holland and Letterman, Conan. And Russell was saying he didn't really enjoy it at the time. He found it quite intense. What was your memory of playing like TV shows?
Russell definitely found it intense. Oh my god, like I remember Russell like going like the first time he did a live session with Steve Lamacq, like Russell kept disappearing, and like he was basically in between songs he was going off to the bathroom to like vomit. Poor guy was so nervous. I mean we all were, but I think Russell felt it very very keenly. Yeah, but he always delivered the goods when it counted, and he still does. Um, but yeah, I think Jules was definitely a watershed moment for me and for the band because we'd all grown up watching that show. I don't think for a minute any of us ever thought we'd ever come close to being on it ourselves. It was insane. It was like so surreal. And that first time we were on there, even though we were extremely nervous, we approached it as if we would never get to be on that show ever again. And I think the intensity of our playing really shows through on that. But yeah, obviously I'm playing both though. Playing Helicopter and Like Eating Glass about 15 BPM faster than on the record. And there was a very funny comment I think on the YouTube. On the Helicopter performance, and I think like the top comments like, yeah, the train's in 10 minutes, lads, or something. And it's like whoever posted that genius, but like it's true. I mean, like it's far faster than it needed to be, but it worked. It like we were lucky that day. It just kind of stuck. Everything kind of came together really well, and even though those performances were out of control, I think there was an intensity there that shone through and made us stand out a little bit.
Yeah. Was that intentional then, the speed, or was it just
No, it was like nerves.
How it came about?
It was pure nerves. It was the dread and the anxiety and everything up. And yeah, I think we all did. We all had this adrenaline coursing through our veins, and I've been spent a bit of time with Gordon recently because we're trying to do a project together, and we're writing some songs, and we were just talking about the old days, and I think he mentioned this. I think it was a performance of one of us. It may have been Luno, which we did for a French TV show. That I think we recorded around the end of 2004, maybe early 2005, and it's ridiculous. I mean, that song was hard enough to play just at the regular speed we were supposed to play it, but again, it's like so fast, and I couldn't. There's no way I could do that now. And we were both saying it's ridiculous. We played it that fast. Like, why? How were we able to do that? And it was nerves. It was pure adrenaline.
Yes. And then I guess you mentioned Glastonbury because obviously it's happening this weekend. So do you have some good Glastonbury memories with Bloc Party?
Do I have some good Glastonbury memories with Bloc Party? I mean, 2005 was, it rained so much and it was so muddy, but yeah, it was a pretty good memory. I mean, the performance was. Let's just say, if you, I would invite anyone to watch that performance back on YouTube and ask themselves like who might be in a slightly altered state by halfway through the gig, and the answer is it's not me. But
Okay.
it becomes abundantly clear who is though, and so yeah, that was kind of. I mean, it was just good to get it under a belt. It was fine, but then yeah, it became kind of a logistical nightmare because we had to be in, I think, Cologne the next day for a gig around like midday or something. So we had to stay at the festival, kind of sleep in the bus a little bit, and then drive to Heathrow and get like the earliest flight that we could get to Germany. But you know, of course, by that point, by the evening, we were all pretty messed up. I mean, like I was dancing on stage to Fatboy Slim holding a giant like Acid House smiley face balloon. You know, it was one of those nights. And, but Brooke, my ex wife, had a she had a DJ set in the Vice tent or something, but it was about a mile across the festival site in like the worst mud I've ever walked through, and we were trying to carry our records, and I just totally ran out of steam, and like my friend Ross was there, and I just remember him like carrying like her entire like thing of records above his head, like across this muddy field, like through all the chaos and noise and whatever else of Glastonbury, and we were all pretty up by this point, and we got there just as like the electricity was cutting out because of like, all the water, and so we just had to go back, and then I think Ross fell over and landed on top of Kelly's sister, and like just like had her face down in a pile of a huge thing of mud, which was quite alarming, but also like very funny. My brother was there; he was also like out of his mind. It was it was it was a really funny night. But then, yeah, we had to get to Cologne the next day, and I just remember like sitting backstage at this festival, and Russell was like, we didn't even have any spare clothes, so we were just covered in mud still, and like Russell was just sitting with his ass in like the old style freezer. Yeah. Anyway, he's just sitting there with his ass in the freezer, and he's like not feeling very happy.
Fair play. And then yeah, I did want to ask about like the stereotypical idea of touring when you're young. You're like supposed to enjoy every minute, but like it must be different in reality. Like how must be a lot of ups and downs and dynamic shifts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, things were largely okay with us until the end of 2005, and then things started to go downhill pretty quickly after that. But yeah, it's a lot. I mean, and just looking back at the list of gigs that we did, and I went through it recently because the old Bloc Party fan site, Bloc Party Net, is on the you can access it through the Internet Archive, and there's a gigography there of like pretty much every gig we ever played, and we did about 160, 170 gigs in 2005. So we were gone half the year, and when we weren't touring, we were either recording or trying to write new material. So yeah, you'd be gone for like a month and a half. You'd be home for maybe 2, 3 days. So you had enough time just to maybe gather your wits about you, say hi to your friends for like 5 minutes, maybe try and visit your family, and then get your washing done, and you'd be out again. And that's all right the first time round, because you do have to make the most of whatever opportunity has been handed to you, and it's pretty hard to say no. It's pretty hard to turn down all of that stuff, and you're willing to do it because you're trying to build a career. But once you've been there and done that and seen it and realised actually how alienating that lifestyle can be, where you're just stuck with the same people for months on end without any real outlet or any real opportunity to gain some perspective from being around the people that you've always known versus your bandmates and crew, etc., industry people, and fake friends and whatever else. It can definitely be a grind, and there were definitely parts of 2005 that I found particularly overwhelming and exhausting, and it just didn't. There was a certain point where it just seemed endless, but it was still pretty cool as well because we hadn't really done that before. But from that point onwards, there was no one really. There was no one in the band who was able to question any of it, and particularly as Kelly had increasingly become like the dominant force in the band, and he wasn't not inclined to say no to things himself. We all felt like we just had to carry on because there would be trouble if we didn't. And of course, there's this very tricky symbiosis with your handlers, with your management and record company, because on one hand they are advocating for your financial interests, at least, because if you're making money then they're making money, but of course because they're making money they're going to keep working you to the bone, like until someone says, no, I can't do it anymore. And there wasn't really anyone around us who felt compelled to actually sit us down and say, look, yeah, we know it's hard work, but don't worry, like this won't be for your entire life. It's all right. And there are people you can talk to if you're feeling the pressure, or if it feels like it's a bit too much. There's always a friendly ear. And there wasn't any of that. There wasn't anyone where it didn't feel like it was a safe thing to actually express any kind of discontent or any sense of feeling overwhelmed and exhausted.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, do you think you're still in the music industry now, obviously? Do you think that's changed?
It's changed a bit. I mean, it felt like a lot was going to change during the pandemic because finally there was no way around the fact that no one could go on tour anymore, or like at least the touring had been placed on hold. So there was a lot of organising and a lot of talk within, like at least on the musician side of things, of actually what could be addressed here to make life easier for people on the road, or for people who work in the industry. But of course, as soon as stuff starts up again, and most people's bread and butter is touring, it's not really from streaming stuff at this point, getting stuff streamed. Once everyone got back out there again and started trying to grab whatever tiny diminishing piece of the pie was left available to them, I think some of that questioning began to diminish. I mean, things have definitely changed from when I started, and out, and it's been encouraging to see some signs of, maybe more of a holistic approach to working with and dealing with musicians. I was fortunate enough to do a couple of gigs with Rina Sawayama last summer. I was filling in I played on one of her tracks on her album, and I filled in for a drummer for a couple of gigs in the US. And one thing that struck me was like how in tune she was with the way she treated her, her employees, her crew. Like she was really really integrated and really mindful of not only the pressures that she personally felt, but like the other people around her, and like it seemed like a lot more positive, the environment, and definitely some more of a conscious effort to employ women, people of color, queer people there as well, and I feel like I'm starting to see more signs of that across the board. It's funny because me and my wife have started watching this 10-year-old TV show called Black Sails, and it's about the golden age of piracy at the start of the 18th century. And literally every other cast member looks like someone I've toured with in Bloc Party. And that's what it used to be. It was like going out. It was like being on a pirate ship or something. Like everyone was just behaving badly and like completely deranged, and people weren't treated very. A lot of stuff flew back then that certainly wouldn't now. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And then discussed it with Russell briefly, but did things catch up with you a bit physically when was it your lung got punctured at some point?
My lung collapsed twice actually. Did things? No, actually, the weird thing is, I think I somewhat improved after that. I think primarily because I had to quit smoking. I kind of I crashed into a wall with my pack a day habit. So yeah, after my lung collapsed on tour at the end of 2006, I had to start looking after myself a bit better, and then it actually collapsed again whilst we were writing Four, and I had to have surgery that time, so I was out of action for about 6 weeks, and I actually felt a lot better after that surgery, and I felt like I had a lot more. I don't know, a lot more. It's weird because I had a part of my lung removed, so you'd think I'd be somewhat diminished, but I actually felt better on stage after that point. So yeah, that didn't really affect me too much.
Well, okay. Because I read it was something to do with your physique as well. I'm not sure.
Yes, tall, thin people tend to have. There's a higher chance of a lung collapse when you're tall and thin. I think it's due to the kind of you're a bit stretched out and the pressures that are placed on in your chest, basically. So that's really what it is.
Okay, fair play. Yeah, I mean, playing the likes of America and well, all over the world, really. Is there a favorite place to play?
I think in terms of like general chaos at gigs, playing in the UK, particularly like the north of England, was probably the most fun for me. UK audiences have always been like very rambunctious, I suppose, in my experience, and that's a lot of fun. As for places to visit, I always enjoy going to Japan just because it's so different, and it's such an interesting. The way people approach putting on shows there is so different as well, and it's just that has always been very interesting for me to be around. And like Tokyo is an incredible city. It's just like it's just one of those places I would recommend anyone to visit if they want to have a real a real sensory overload. The US less so. I think touring the US is a real grind, and I think I toured the US so much in Bloc Party because I think there was this vague hope that we'd finally make it, and I think once you do make it in America, the rewards are much greater. But we never really got beyond playing. There was a brief moment like mid 2006 where I thought maybe this is going to work, but I mean for the most part we were playing like 1,000, 2,000 cap venues, and it's you don't make any money like that. That's good, but you don't make any money doing it because of the logistics of having to do that in America. The amount of travel, the amount of time you spend on the bus, the amount of driving, everything. It's just if you break even, you're fortunate to do that. And it's also like, I don't know, you kind of get to the Midwest and people are just sort of standing there staring as if you've just been dropped off an alien ship or something. It's it sucks.
Yeah,
And the food. I love how Americans slag off British food, because the food in America for the most part is disgusting. It's just like it's not food.
And then just going back to the music, then, like, obviously the sound changes from album to album. Were you quite happy with the way it was sounding? Like,
I think a lot has been made that maybe, well, people speculate that I left the band. Well, I was kicked out of the band because I had a monster cocaine habit, which I didn't, and I'm happy to talk about that later on.
Okay.
Or that I was very unhappy with the creative direction with the band, and that wasn't really why I left either. But I mean, I had less problems with the creative direction than I did with the actual lack of communication with said direction, and I think I can only speak to it from my point of view, because I have no idea what Kelly was going through, but I think he found it. He was either reluctant to, or was finding it increasingly difficult to find the wherewithal to actually communicate what he wanted from the band, and it did cause a lot of tension. And yeah, admittedly, I will say that me and Gordon were probably like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? Like, why is this becoming so electronic? But I mean, I would have been more than happy to go along with it if that was communicated and executed in a way that made sense as musicians. And I don't think it ever really was. It was like, oh, we're going to change the sound. Okay, here's some synths. Here's a drum machine. Now, okay, there's no drums. Whatever. It is what it is. If the music's good, I don't care, because I'm a drummer, and like ultimately it's my job to serve the songs. I'm not the songwriter. I'm not fronting this operation ever in a band. No matter who I'm playing with. I'm there to do my bit, and I felt like, because I didn't really have an into the process or any real insight, that I wasn't really in the best environment to thrive as a musician, and it's a lot easier to accept maybe your input being reduced, or the sound being changed, if you know why it's happening and how it's happening, and at least being given the ability to have some opinion on that. But that just kind of didn't really happen at all, really, from Silent Alarm onwards. I guess 4 was more of a return to us playing as a band, but I think by that point it was a bit too late in the game, really, to undo everything that had occurred up to that point.
yeah, I mean, when you get to this 2009 hiatus, I think there's a quote from you saying you wouldn't mind trying something else. Is that how you felt at that point, obviously?
Yeah, and by trying something else, I think what I really meant was I wouldn't mind trying not playing music.
Right, okay.
I needed a break. I needed some perspective, and I just wanted to look at life from the vantage point of someone who got to do something really incredible for a few years, and I just wanted to reconnect with people who I'd known and loved before I was in the band, my friends and my family, and I think it's in anyone's best interest to just get off the wagon every now and then and take stock, and that's something we never. The thing with Kelly is, or at least at that point, it was that he just didn't ever want to stop. He just carried on going, and I don't know if he ever questioned that internally. He certainly didn't with us, and I think there's only so much you can actually write about when you spent your whole life in a tour bus. It's oh no, here's a song about how the sandwiches were backstage were subpar. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, I think I kind of wanted to work on some of my own stuff just for my own personal edification, and to actually, reconnect with the joy of making music outside of being on that album cycle, on that treadmill. I just wanted to try and find a space for myself to enjoy it as a hobby again, really. And I think that's what I meant by doing something different.
Okay, so you were kind of setting up different projects around that time as well.
I'd been writing a bit on my own, and I actually wanted to get better at recording stuff as well. So yeah, that year was the year I moved to New York and bought a house and began putting together a little home studio in the basement. And I wrote a couple of things here and there I was proud of, but I was just mainly about and trying to figure out how it all actually works.
Yeah. And then, don't know, a bit of a personal question or intrusive question, but there's a lot of talk about money with the music industry now.
Right.
Like, there's all that kind of early, buzz and endless touring. Does that have benefits financially when you get to that hiatus? Can you relax a bit financially?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I on one hand, if I'm being very honest with myself, on one hand, the relentless grind and the inability to find any sense of perspective outside of band life was, I personally found that very difficult. But in the back of my mind was, well, just do this for 5-10 years, and I can live fairly comfortably off of that. I'll be fine. So it's worth it. And yeah, it as much as it sounds like I'm complaining, I'm still glad I went through it. Obviously, I wouldn't change any of that at all. I wish we'd had a bit more, mental health support or a recourse to actually dealing with some of the pressures of life as a musician. But I mean, in terms of what it afforded us, we are incredibly fortunate, and I've been on the other side of it. I'm in a band now where it's a struggle every day, and the other members are always like, I don't know if this is ever going to work. And I've seen now particularly how, I don't know, I mean, the industry is always the creative. Every industry is exploitative, but the particular way in which the creative industry is exploitative is the quality of that has definitely shifted markedly. And aside from the pittance you get from streaming, the other thing is I'm not an AI evangelist, and I'm not an AI naysayer either. I don't really have a huge opinion on it, but what I do know is that the likes of Daniel Ek would love to cut out the musician entirely, and can't wait until AI is just making all the music so he can flood his platform with it, and that's a huge shift, and that makes life even harder for musicians now. And I think the pandemic a lot of things up as well. I think a lot of people who were regular, people who attended gigs regularly just stopped coming back, and the pop paradigm went up. Shifted another gear. So people are way more into the likes of Taylor Swift or whatever, and quite happy to save up or spend most of their earnings on watching her a couple of times a year, and dropping $2-3 grand on that experience versus low to mid tier or more grassroots groups getting that support from a live audience. In Bloc Party, we were very lucky to have gotten our foot in our door when we did, before everything completely changed.
Yeah. No, it's mad, isn't it? I was looking at Paul McCartney tickets. It's also one saying he's playing in Manchester soon, and it's 130 quid minimum.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, when did that become a norm? I'm the mind boggles. I was I remember I was on Ticketmaster recently, just looking at ticket prices just for fun, and I was like, oh, Boy Genius. Well, they're ostensibly an indie supergroup, but they're playing arenas now. I wonder how much their tickets are. And I was like, what the fuck? Who's paying $200 to watch Boy Genius? Most anemic, basic group of all time. And it's in an arena. Wow, okay. Ticketmaster have an awful lot to answer for, and I understand in the United States Congress is making moves to try and break up the monopoly, but I think the damage has already been done. Personally, I don't think there's anything you do now.
It's just I don't know how someone like McCartney, who's like one of the richest people in music, what process does that go through to like? I don't know why he needs that money. I don't understand. Is it all the other people involved that think, right, we can make some serious money here?
Well, absolutely. I mean, promoters aren't going to like undersell, or they're not going to like underprice Paul McCartney tickets, and I'm sure I'm sure someone like Paul McCartney doesn't really have much say, or even really cares to have much say in the matter. He's not like he's a very old man. His brain's completely gone, and like he's got more money than God, and like he just wants to play a few gigs before he dies, and like all right, whatever that takes, I'm sure he does it. Like that's really that's a lot of it. But yeah, I mean, in the US, Ticketmaster has the monopoly, and there are. I mean, it goes in tandem with the economy, right? Like the cost of living crisis, like and inflation, and like how much food costs now, and everything else. Like all these huge companies are like continually spinning this message that everything's become too expensive. Like we've had to raise our costs and stuff. They're making record profits. They're all about at the end of the day. I mean, that's what they are. They're lying to all of us, and like so is Ticketmaster. Like there's no need for anyone to have to pay $200 to go and watch Boy Genius play. It's just like it's a complete swindle.
When you say they've got a monopoly, what do you mean?
They're the only the main, pretty much the only way you can get tickets in the United States. Like Ticketmaster and Live Nation are like they're all in cahoots on this. So it's the same with record companies too. I mean, like everything's under the umbrella of like the four big ones, like Universal's, Warner's, Sony, and So it's like once they have that much power, they can do whatever they want, and they can say whatever they want, and they expect that people will just suck it all up.
Yeah. Right, just going back quickly to 2009. Just want to cover that a little bit because Russell said that you were basically talked into carrying on at that point. Is that fair?
Yeah. I was definitely when we took a year off, and then it became inevitable we were going to have to meet up and talk about the future of the band. And I planned it with my first trip back to the UK to visit my family. I think for Christmas. Since I'd moved to the US, and we had a band meeting, and I mean, I was definitely dreading it because it's like this is where I'm going to quit the band, and then I don't know. Through the course of it, I was kind of like, well, maybe things have changed a bit. Kelly sort of seemed somewhat contrite for some of his, some of the things that he. He brought to the table that were making, some of the things he brought to the table that was making life difficult for making band life difficult. But I don't know. I just kind of thought, well, let's just give it one more go. Like it can't hurt. I mean, probably won't get to be able to do this again after this band anyway. So let's just do another record. And I was definitely motivated to sort of stick it to some of the other bands that were kind of doing pretty well in the wake of us. So I was like, why not? But I had to be. I mean, initially I agreed to at least help write and record 4, and I was very much on the fence about touring. But by the time we'd done the record, I was kind of like, well, I want to play these songs, I guess, in front of people. So I did most of that cycle.
Yeah, fair. And then at what point did you realise that it was it had to come to an end type thing, or was it like seems to be maybe a point before the tour finished or something?
I quit mid-tour, yes, and it's come to my attention very recently that a lot of people actually have inferred that maybe I had a drug problem, which I didn't at all.
I'll just read that. I'll read that quote. I think it was Kelly who said, "I can tell you it was about someone doing cocaine and someone not being into it. That's all I'm going to say." But then apparently you later said that wasn't about you and Gordon. I don't know.
It had nothing to do with me and Gordon, and like this is the most frustrating. Like I felt. At the time, I felt like, well, okay, a few things were beginning to happen. Well, a few things happened in the kind of final month of me being in the band that sort of like. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, I was actually, as we were drawing the four album cycle to a close, I was like, yeah, I'm good. I think this is it. I'm fine. I don't think there's anything else I can gain really from being in this band. I'd certainly felt in terms of as a musician, I wasn't really able to offer much else, and I certainly wasn't learning anything from the process and of writing music with Bloc Party. And I think if you are a creative person by nature, like you should always want to be learning something new, or at least trying to do something new. And I just felt like we weren't doing that as a band for whatever reason. I mean, I'd certainly, for my own part, I feel like I'd certainly grown used to relying on certain tropes in my own playing, and I didn't really see a way out of that. And I just felt like collectively there was no way we were going to become a new band or like do something that was really going to push us again. So I was like, yeah, it's fine. I don't need to. Actually, I'm pretty comfortable now. I don't need to be away from my family, my friends, quite as much as this, and not really have a life outside of this band for the sake of just playing the same old songs and like writing them in exactly the same way. So I definitely was ready to leave after that record. I wasn't necessarily looking for a catalyst or something to really push me over the edge, but yeah, a few things happened that just made me think, well, this is not. Kelly isn't really creating a very, a very happy. He's not cultivating a happy working environment, and I essentially was just working in the band. I was just like a worker, like anyone else. That's all I was doing, and the day I'm not going to go into too much detail because it involves someone who wasn't in the band, but and I still feel compelled to preserve their dignity, even though I'm sure they don't really mind at this point. But there was a birthday celebration going on in the bus, which I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Were drugs involved? Apparently, I think Kelly took umbrage to that and was trying to remove that person from the touring party. So I when I heard about this, I was kind of like I can't work with this person anymore. I'm just going to quit. And so I did. I just I got back to my house, and because we were in New York, and I just sent an email. I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm fine. And that's really what happened. But yeah, I mean, as a band, did we never do drugs? Of course not. Like, I think anyone who's been in a rock band and toured consistently has definitely had that come into their world. But did any of us have a problem? Not at all. And I didn't even drink before going on stage. Like, I couldn't. There was one time I had like a beer and I went out and played, and I just did a horrible job. Like, I would like to. I seek solace in the fact that I think anyone who encountered me would have appreciated that I was, as a live performer, I was about as professional as I could have been, really.
Yeah. It definitely came across that way. But like you say, you were ready to leave at that point, so it's kind of like there's no regrets afterwards type thing.
It would have behooved me to have done that final month of festival touring. I just say my finances would have looked a little bit better, but but it was like, I don't know. It really felt like it just felt like the bottom of it had come out for me. Like it really was. I just felt like Kelly was an insurmountable obstacle, and it was like, I don't want to go out. I just don't think I can go out on stage anymore and play this person's music and like give, attend to my duties as a drummer and if with 100% commitment. And I always wanted to go out there and like play like I really meant it, and suddenly I was just like a switch went off. I was like, I can't do it. Like, I can't. It's not fair. It's not fair on the band. It's not fair on like whoever's like paying to watch this band perform at this point. I don't believe in this project anymore. I don't want to do it, and I couldn't. Yeah, that's really what happened. But yeah, I think as a middle-aged man looking back, I think I could have sucked it up maybe for a month longer and just like left with a little bit more dignity. But at the time, I wasn't even trying to make a point. I just like something happened where I was like, I can't do it. I can't, and I'm not going to do it. No one can fucking make me do this anymore. I'm done, and that was it.
Yeah, yeah. Were we able to like were Matt and were Russell and were Russell and Gordon understanding like what about Kelly as well? Don't know.
Well, I basically, in my email, you know, in certain times, I told himself. So, like, you know, I immediately burned that bridge, and
Has that been the same since?
huh?
Has it been burnt since type thing?
I mean, that bridge is totally burned. It's like I haven't spoken to him since I quit the band, and
Right.
that I'm totally fine with that. I mean, yeah, with Gordon and Russell, it was a bit more. I mean, I don't see Russell that much because you know I don't, but like I still care about him deeply, and if he is in town, I will, you know, we will hang out. I saw him last summer when Bloc Party were in town supporting Paramore. Gordon, I'm much more in contact with because he left around the same time, and I think musically we have a lot more in common, and I think our philosophy on life is fairly similar as well, and we've always stayed in touch. And like as I said earlier, we're trying to write some music together now. But Russell was pretty. Russell and Gordon were pretty generous about my decision, and Russell's a born musician. He's born to play music. He'll do it until the day he dies. And like I think he just accepted it and was ready to move on straight away and just get on with the rest of, you know, touring that record and continuing his life in the band. Gordon like was very honest with me after the fact and was like, yeah, I was pretty disappointed that you left when you did, and I totally get where he was coming from for sure, because I think to him it felt like I left him hanging out to dry a bit, which yeah, if you look at if you look at it a certain way, yeah, that's totally what I did. It was quite a selfish decision that I made, but I also couldn't, like as I said, I just felt like I couldn't continue.
Yeah. And I didn't really discuss Gordon leaving with Russell, but did you see that was on the cards? Were you not surprised when that happened?
I don't know. I mean, I thought there was. I mean, he seemed kind of unhappy from that point onwards. I mean, like I think also for him, he wrestled with the same things that I did. But you know, I don't want to speak to his experience because I think he's much better situated to you know breathe life and words into what he experienced as his journey with the band ended. But I could see him leaving. I didn't know if he would or not. But so yeah, I mean. I think the circumstances under which he left were a little bit more tricky for him than me, and it was definitely something he struggled with for a while afterwards, for sure. But yeah, but I don't really want to speak to the circumstances under which he left or what his personal experience was.
Yeah, sure. And then you were quickly into the band that you're in today. Is it? How do you pronounce it?
Algiers,
sorry.
the capital of Algeria.
Okay, right. So yeah, you were quickly involved with that then, as soon as you left.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, yeah, that definitely surprised me. It wasn't my intention to join another band so soon. Though when I started with them, it was 2015. So yeah, it'd been over a year since it'd been a year and a half since I'd left Bloc Party, but I hadn't stopped making music completely. I did did a project called Red Love with Alex Newport, who produced Four, and he was living in New York at the time, and yeah, he kind of reached to me out of the blue when I was kind of in the middle of nothing in particular, and was like, he was like, yeah, I enjoyed. He was really nice to me. He was very generous. He was like, I enjoyed working with you on Four. Like, I've got all these songs. Do you want to help me like finish them? Do you want to do some drums and stuff? And like, I did a little bit of keys on Four as well. So he knew I could do other stuff, and he was like, yeah, maybe you can help with that stuff. And he didn't really realize I played guitar as well. And I ended up playing quite a lot of guitar on the record that we ended up making. But, so yeah, I kept a hand in with music, and then my friend, one of my dearest friends, Tom Morris, who engineered, produced, recorded the first Algiers record, reached out to me and asked if I was interested in playing drums with the band as they began touring that record, because they knew of me, and when they found out that Tom knew me as well, they were like, oh yeah. I think they jokingly said, do you want to give Matt a shout and see what he's up to these days? And I was somewhat familiar with the music prior to joining. Tom had played me some demos, and I thought they were very interesting. So I was definitely excited by the prospect of doing it again with a completely different group of people.
Yeah, was it kind of a refreshing dynamic, if you like, with that band?
It was, and still is. We're kind of in the middle of things right now, and it's unclear when we'll be reconvening. But yeah, I mean, Franklin, Ryan, and Lee definitely approach things very differently, and the three of them are a lot more articulate and in command of what it is to put music together than I felt Kelly was, and I that was helpful to me, because I had much more of a clear idea of what I was supposed to be doing in that band. Although Algiers music can be quite maximalist sometimes, so it's kind of hard to find a place. It's kind of hard to find a way to situate my playing in the band, and it's definitely something I've struggled with here and there for sure. But yeah, their approach was definitely very, very refreshing to me when I started playing with them, for sure.
It is. No, I've been enjoying listening to it this week. Just conscious, I want to get to these people's questions before I run out of time.
Oh yeah, Karen.
So let's go for it. Frankie Tafora on Instagram says, best song to play live back in the day.
Ooh, I mean, the crowd pleasers were always fun just because of the reaction. So obviously, Helicopter and Banquet were the two songs I enjoyed playing. When I was physically up to it, playing Luno was a good laugh, because just nailing it, like managed to get through that song at all, always felt like a huge achievement to me. Like Eating Glass, I think, because I think that song, more than any other song, really showcased what the band was capable of doing at that time, and I think it really highlighted what each member was doing in the band, or the four of us, in the best way possible. Positive Tension was also fun to play because it had so many different feels to it. As a drummer, I always found that very interesting to play. Later on down the line, once I finally figured out how to play to a click and to a drum machine, which took me about 3 or 4 years, The Prayer was quite good fun to do. And I really enjoyed Aries as well, actually, on Intimacy. That was always fun to play, and that always seemed to get people going.
Cool. And then Lewis Spragnell on Instagram, has he ever watched Bloc Party live since leaving the band?
No. Well, no, that's a lie. I watched what was it? Was it I watched a TV performance, I think, when they were doing hymns. I think it may have been Jimmy Fallon, but I watched it with the sound off because I was like, I was like, I can't, like, if they're better than when me and Gordon were in the band, I couldn't bear it. But I mean, look, I've met Louise, and I've heard some of the other stuff that she's played on, and she is an excellent. I mean, she's a better drummer than me. I mean, I'll hold my hands up. She's better. So there's no shame in admitting that. But I watched their TV performance with the sound off, but it it was weird, man. Because like Kelly wasn't playing anything, and he was like trying to dance along. And there's one bit where I was like, "This has got to be a meme. Someone needs to make a gif of this." Where it's like Russell's like looking down at his guitar, like concentrating real hard, trying to play real well, and like the camera's like focused on him, and then Kelly just briefly appears and shot like dancing like someone's dad, and then kind of like goes off camera again. I was like, "What's this? Like, this is not the band I was in."
Yes, we've kind of covered it already, but El Bevan says, "How did he keep up that stamina through those songs during the show? Is it stopping smoking?"
Well, I mean, like, yeah, as already touched upon, like quitting smoking really helped. Yeah, I mean, back prior to that, it was nervous energy, and youth as well. Like, definitely, I had the energy and the mobility to kind of more or less pull that stuff off, I guess. But now I doubt I can do it. I mean, not that I've been asked to participate in any of the 20-year silent alarm stuff, but there's no way I could do it.
Yeah, someone did ask that if there's any chance you were going to appear in that, but obviously the relationships
that's
as
a hard
probably
no.
not.
That's a hard no. I mean, like, I'm sure this whole like interview is going to come across as sour grapes because I wasn't asked, and actually, that couldn't be any further from the truth. Like, I would have loved to have been asked just so I could have said no, but but I mean, I don't know. Like, there've been periods where I've talked to Gordon, and I've definitely there was maybe a time like 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, well, it'd be fun to do it again one more time, but actually, I'm 45 years old, and I'm too old, and like I like my knees hurt a lot. Like my wrist is, my wrists are kind of like they don't feel great after been playing at this point, and I think I could probably do a passable job of playing Silent Alarm if I like sat down and like rehearsed every day for like 3 months straight. But I have time or patience to do that anyway. Like, or the drive to want to do that. Moreover, like, Louise has been in the band for as long as I have, maybe longer now, and I think it would be, even if I was given the opportunity, I actually would have deep misgivings about just barging in there and just kind of like replacing someone, or just like stepping in for a while, and that's her job now, it's not mine.
Yeah, that makes me feel old, actually. She's been in it longer than you now.
I think so, yeah, pretty much. And like, and it's like, if I didn't quit the band so I could like get on a reunion tour like 10 years after the fact. Like, that was the last. It couldn't have been any further from my mind. It's like that. It's not something. It's not something I ever really. It wasn't a consideration of mine. Let's just say.
Yeah. Got a bit of a random one from Greg on Twitter saying, "What does he think would happen if we only ate crisps?"
Well, I would imagine that the price of potatoes would rise considerably. I'd probably want to get some stock in some factory farm, I guess.
Great. George Maddox says, "Does you remember the gig at Astoria when all of us in the crowd knew the lyrics to the new track from A Weekend in the City, despite it not being released? We clearly all had the same hooky copy, and Kelly called us out on it by going, how do you all know the lyrics to this?"
I mean, I'm sure Kelly was just feigning astonishment. We knew that what happened? Some intern at V2 leaked the record, our own record label.
Wow.
That's what happened, and it was right in the middle of like. I think I was still in hospital when my lung collapsed when that leaked. So it was just like it was all. I mean, we knew it was probably going to happen, but the fact that it was someone who's supposed to be working for us made it like so egregious.
So you knew exactly who had done it?
I can't remember his name. I'm sure he's like a CEO at Spotify now or something. You know, these always land on their feet somehow. But yeah, I think his name might have been James something, if I recall. I can't like all the emails pertaining to that on my old like Hotmail account, which vanished into the ether a very long time ago. But yeah, apparently he was dealt with swiftly. But I mean, not before I had the chance to kneecap him.
I mean, do you think that definitely hindered you rather than helped you? Would you say?
No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, like it only hindered us insofar as we didn't have the chance to shape the narrative of the record before it came out. But like everyone's records were getting leaked. That, you know, it was a sport, wasn't it? Trying to find someone's record online that had been leaked.
True.
And it happened to everyone. We did our best to avoid it from happening. I think even to the point where the the promo copies of the record were they were MP3 players with the headphones soldered into the jack, so you couldn't like rip it. But I mean, obviously, he somehow figured out how to do that. So there was only so much we could do to prevent that from happening. But it you know it was hard because people had already heard the record and made their minds up on it before it came out, before we'd actually gotten a chance to do our promo campaign properly. And I get it. You know, could it have been a better record? Absolutely. Like we could have shaved about 15 minutes off of that and maybe like scraped away half of the production on that record. But it is what it is. It's just, you know, there's nothing you can do about that. But you know, the fans really quickly got on board to the fact that they preferred the B-sides more than A Weekend in the City, and you know, it's fine. It's not, you know, you make the music. You can't control how people are going to receive it at all. You can't. But I think it did. It hurt us quite a lot, the fact that we couldn't stop it from. We couldn't let that record come out in the way in which we wanted it to, and we couldn't. You know, because to be fair to Kelly, had this whole like, you know, it was vaguely a concept record. I think maybe we fluffed our lines a bit when it came to that, and it could have been a bit more cohesive for sure. But like he, at the time at least, I think he put a lot of thought into what he wanted to say about this record before it came out, and like before he even had the opportunity to do so, people had already listened to it. So it was tough. Do I remember that gig? I might have a shred of a memory of it. I don't recall it being at the Astoria. Like, you know, a lot is, you know, a lot of it is lost to the history of man at this point.
Yeah, fair play. And then one from TNAF Utz. How often do you get asked about Pete Tong?
Not so much now. A lot when I was younger, which I always found a bit, to be honest with you, kind of offensive, really, because it was like a weirdly like unracially coded or racially uncoded question. Because you know, having grown up in small towns and like nowhere, it was pointed out every day that I wasn't white. And suddenly people were like, oh, Pete Tong, you late. It's like, Pete Tong's white and I'm not. So do you suddenly not notice that I'm not white? You know, I used to find that question annoying.
Yeah, fair play. I suppose, yeah, it's a question I can ask. Like, do you feel like being more of a diverse band, your experience of that scene was different in any way?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, it was, you know, it was particularly hard on Kelly for sure, and like, you know, to the point where he was constantly asked, well, you know, by journalists, what's it like being a black guy in an indie band? Like, what? You do realize black people invented rock and roll, right? That stuff used to drive me crazy. I mean, you know, as much as I complain about Kelly sometimes, like, there were a lot of things that happened to him that set him apart from what was going on in the music scene in general. I don't like, you know, I do not blame him for losing his patience with that and just feeling very jaundiced by the whole thing. Like I think it was particularly. It seems to me that it was particularly hard for him, and yeah, that was really hard to see on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, mate, well, really appreciate your time, and I'll let you go. I just finish on two questions. Was there a high point of being in Bloc Party, and is there anything you do differently?
Is there anything I do? Okay. What would I? Okay. Was there a high point? Probably headlining the tent at Reading in 2005. No one's going to take that away from me. That's for sure. That was just an incredible moment. Is there anything I do differently? The one time I was holding hands with Helena Christensen backstage, I would have been more aware of my surroundings, and I would not have allowed the fire exit sign that I accidentally grazed with my head to swing back and hit a square in the face.
Did you manage to recover that? Or?
No, absolutely not. She was like, and I was like, yeah, I'm good. That's one to tell the grandkids.